Thank you, Annie, here for doing the acknowledgement, and I add to that, but nothing can beat the words that you just said, and the wisdom that you gave too around the fires and the changes, and also the sorry business that we've experienced recently across winter. And winter's always very difficult for people in terms of health-wise, and particularly people that may live on the street, and I acknowledge that too. For me, you'll see I am a Pro Vice Chancellor, and I did meet Rosalie in 1988. You know, for me, I was a young woman in my early 20s studying at Kelvin Grove. And for me, that was a bit of a lifeline. I had grown up in Inala. People know Inala? Okay. So I was a child in Inala. I grew there from a very young baby right through until I was about 15. And then my family moved to the Redbank Plains, Goodna area, and my mother still resides there. We moved out of Inala, so I went to Richlands East Primary School. I also went to Richlands High School. So, I was a state school kid. And then I moved into St. Peter Claver College for year 11 and 12, which is a Catholic co-ed school. And then from there I actually got a job. I didn't go to Kelvin Grove College and meet Rosalie straight away. I went and worked in a pharmacy as a pharmacy assistant, and I worked in Fortitude Valley. And it was when I was around 20 that I kind of had a bit of a revelation that I thought, if I don't kind of do something and get an education and listen to what, in a sense, some of my family, not all my family is supportive of education. I'll be very clear about that. I thought back and thought, well, I could be still serving drunks at 4 o'clock in the morning and working in a chemist shop getting called the girl in another 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. But what am I going to do about that? So I enrolled in Teachers College at Kelvin Grove, BCAE, and that changed my life. And, to get to that point from where I had been in Inala, it was very tough as a kid at school sometimes. It was a very hard environment in Inala, but it was also some of the great times I had too. Some of the good times I had were actually external to my house. And I won't go into too much in terms of what was going on in my home, other than to say my father was a chronic alcoholic. He's since passed away. And, would come home and we would have havoc in the house. But he'd also be gone for days on end, and that time would be quite calm. So I say that, and I do share that with students in other ways, in terms of saying, we don't have to live our statistics, that we can be our own statistic and cut through to make change and to be the change that we need to be. And I share more about that with them around what that means and how they can do that, particularly those young people that have experienced violence or abuse, and how they might do that and how they might get help. Okay, so I found myself at college. I did become a teacher, and then lo and behold, I went back and I taught at Richlands High School. The same principal was there who used to give me a bit of curry at the same, when I was a student. Because I was a very good student, but my behaviour at times led a lot to be desired. But I was a good student. But I did become a teacher, and I did teach at Richlands High School. I also taught at Bundamba State High School, Bremer State High School, Laidley, and Redbank Plains State High School. And Redbank Plains was my last high school. I then went to back to university and undertook my B.Ed, or the in-service year. And it was a bit of insight from my stepfather. My mother had remarried and said, there's only a matter of time, Bronwyn, before teachers have to get their extra year and become 4-year qualified. And I was still young enough and able enough and early in my career that he felt that perhaps that was something that I should do. And so I did that, and did that full time, and also undertook teaching part-time, or people would call it locum, and that's what I did. And I had intention to go back to teaching. I never did. So I took on the B.Ed in service year, and then I went from there to the Commonwealth and worked in Commonwealth Health. I got a transfer to Rockhampton. After a period of time, I worked in that regional office, and you know what? Rockhampton took my heart. And I've had a history of going back and forth to Rockhampton ever since. So people from Rocky, if you're seeing this video, I shout out to all of you mob there too. But I've worked in and out of Rocky for many years, and so I went to Rockhampton. As things would have it, it didn't work out. The regional office was going to be closed. I moved back to Brisbane. At this time I was doing further study. I was doing a master's degree. And I did a master's degree at QUT. BCAE had become QUT. I moved into being at QUT. I also undertook a second master's at University of Tasmania. And people think, wow, that's craziness. But if you understand, I was in student politics, and what was happening, I did enrol in a PhD, but what had happened was the university I was in the PhD with disaffiliated from the national peak body for student unionism, and I kind of had to get enrolled in a place where to be a student. I was the national president of a student union of the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations, so I kind of had to get enrolled pretty fast, you know, because otherwise I would have lost the presidency. So I did that, and through Tasmania, and I had a ball there actually. I had absolute ball, and then I finished the PhD. I moved back to Rockhampton. I was doing a lecturing job at the Central Queensland University at that time. When I finished my PhD, with great sadness, you know, there was no job for me at that time in that university. And so I looked around, and the job that I took on was actually in Anglicare. I went to work for Anglicare. And all of my experience in terms of my community activism work, my student activism work, I'd always been in community organisations since I was 17, 18. That's the other thing, I haven't said that, but I was. So I'd been in that community sector, whether it was on, you know, I was on the first board of what is in the Ipswich area of We Care. People might know that board, with Eddie and Denise Ruskell were on that board, and one of the Chapmans. We were the first board of that. It's a Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander hack program. And so I'd had all that experience, plus my Commonwealth Health experience, and then went into work for Anglicare. The organisation changed and morphed, and then I changed from there to Queensland Health, and I worked for Queensland Health for 3 years, and I got the tap on the shoulder to say, Bronwyn, after you finish your PhD you only get a certain window, and that certain window is to do further study, or what they call a postdoctoral fellowship. And so I was strongly encouraged by the Queensland Aboriginal Islander Health Council and the person who tapped me on the shoulder that I could do more. Because I'd sort of capped myself at my education and thought maybe that's where it would be. But other people saw that possibly, you know, I should go and do more. And so I did do that. And I got that postdoctoral fellowship, and I went on to work with Quake. I then got some work with the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service and VATCHO, and with Monash University. And then from there moved back to Brisbane. I'm giving you the short version. At QUT, so I worked there for a while. Had a fellowship in New Zealand, went over there, came back to QUT, and then the job came up at Central Queensland University. Then it changed its name to CQ University, and I think you got a bag down there.
Yeah, that's me.
That's it. That's right. So I got a job at CQ University, and then I moved back to Rockhampton. So, you know, I've had that history going back and forward, and I do have a partner who lives in Rockhampton. I do have grandchildren who live in Rockhampton, so that's part of my heart place too now. So I do have 7 grandchildren there, and a life there. So, and then I'd been at CQU for 6 years, and then this job at University of Queensland came up, and I thought I'm going to apply for that job, and I got that job to move back down here. It was with great sadness that when I moved back, you know, within a month or two moving back, my grandmother passed away. So I say that in great sadness, but in essence, you know, we knew that was coming, but also it was one of the reasons, not her per se, but just to come back, because some of my family members are getting older, and I'm at the point where I need to be here to also assist and provide some of that care. and also give back to community here in ways that I've given to other communities over the years. As things would have it, I also got very ill myself last year, and that resulted in July, me spending 7 weeks in hospital. And for people who've been in hospital, you would know that 7 weeks is a very long time, including 2 weeks in intensive care. And then I had a period after that 7 weeks of rehabilitation as well. So I kind of had from July through to December off work of this new job, and then I've been back into my role since January, and kind of really now, it's only been this last July, August, that I'm kind of feeling at 90 something, getting to that 100% again. So I've had a bit of a journey myself. But people who know and have had those sort of journeys where you become very ill also know that it is a great time to reflect. It is a good time to think about what life's about, and good time to think about what you really want to do with the time that you have in the sense of your life, okay? It's not that I'm thinking I'm going to pass next week, but you become more aware, and I've become more aware of my own mortality, okay? And the fragileness of one's life and my life. And so, you know, I work very more intently these days. I work more intently around what is important, the small stuff, not to sweat that small stuff, because, you know, in 5 years, 10 years or 20 years or 50 years, really, does that small stuff make a difference if I put all this energy and effort today? Okay? So I really think about what I'm doing, and I guess that's kind of one of the messages I want you to think about today is, what are you really doing, and what is your intent in terms of when you do things that you do? Okay? So I want you to think about that. That's kind of a short version. There's lots of other things along the way. You know, as we all have, I'm 56, my next birthday, so I've given you a very quick run through of my life of 56 years. I want you all to close your eyes first, and you're not allowed to peek. And no peeking. And put your hand out. If you're eating a sandwich, you've got to eat it fast, because you're going to get something in your hand. It's not going to bite you, it's not going to hurt you, it's not going to scratch you in any shape or form.
This is trust.
Okay. Just feel it in your hand, keep your eyes closed. Just feel the smoothness of it and the shape of it. Alright, you can open your eyes and look at it. You know what? Do you know what this is? Bunya nut. Yeah. So we've just pretty much finished the season for bunya nuts. Right, and I put this in here for a really special reason today. And bunya nuts, you know, when you look at the history of bunya nuts, they've been on the planet or on, you know, the continent, mostly in southeast Queensland or part of northern New South Wales, southeast Queensland up to around Miriamvale. You know where Miriamvale is. They don't. If you see them further north, you know, mostly people have taken them there because it's a bit hot for them. So we were really sad during Cyclone Marcy. I mean, I lost a pergola and other things, you know, the house, and it's not that long ago now, you know, 2015, but in February. And but one of the things we saw was a lot of the big old trees went down, and there was a bunya nut tree, the one in the Botanic Gardens, that was lost in the cyclone. And I'm sure they were lost in other areas too. But bunya trees, or bunya, there's a range of names for them. They date back to the time of the dinosaurs. Right? So I don't know if people know that. You know, you've got the hoop pine, and you've got the wallamai pine and the bunya pine. They're the three oldest trees in Australia in terms of the livelihood of continent. But if we think about these bunya trees, the ones that are alive today, that could be 300 or 400 years old, Imagine what they've witnessed, okay? Imagine all the things they've witnessed already in their lifetimes, and they still have the witnessing to go through, okay? Imagine that. So the ones that are on the coastline, possibly they saw Cook coming up, okay? They watched those boats come up. They saw the Europeans start moving through land. They saw some of the killings, the massacres. They saw missionaries come. They witnessed a lot of things. Yeah? They witnessed a lot of things. And the one thing I say to students is these little nuts here, which are these, actually come out of this pod here and out of that bigger nut. Okay? Because most people, they have not seen them. You mightn't even see them. People don't even know what they are.
They're on strata.
They're on strata, yeah. But when they grow, sometimes those nuts, they can be 10 kilos to 15 kilos. They can knock you out. You can imagine that, right? But how does even that know that it can be a great tree like that, that can be 600 years old, that can have a lineage to the oldest trees in this continent? All right? And I often talk with people and students about saying, we don't know. When we have young Indigenous kids, young Aboriginal children, and this applies, you know, you work in C&K, right? And there's people here that have grandchildren. You might have an Aboriginal grandchild, or might know people that are with your... We don't know, just like we don't know with the non-Indigenous kids, that they are going to grow the same as this bunya seed. This can grow to be a great tree. This one thing. It's not that huge part, because this one will grow one tree. Okay? We don't know that that child can be a great leader. That child may be one of the greatest leaders that we've seen to come. And so that's how I treat all of those young people coming through. We have to nurture those young people as if they are, and they are going to be, the future leaders. Okay? I want people to think about those grandchildren that you may have, and other people's grandchildren and their grandchildren, because we need them to be leaders. In terms of reconciliation, we need to grow the leadership for what we need in this country. It's not going to happen by itself. Okay? We need Indigenous and non-Indigenous leaders. We don't just need them for now, we need them for the future. And this country needs them, okay, to be the better place it can be. I'm going to keep referring to these bunya nuts and these trees through my talk, because we want to think about what will these bunya trees continue to witness in terms of our behaviour, continue to witness in terms of communities' activism or communities' lack of activism, communities' reconciliation efforts or communities' lack of reconciliation efforts. All right? Because they see everything the same way they have been seeing everything. And you can think, oh, they don't talk. Well, how do you know they don't talk to each other? How do you know? When we talk about all things are related on country, you know. Okay, I'm going to keep moving through. So if we talk about the framework for reconciliation, and I'm not going to go into this too much, those people that are from Reconciliation Queensland, you'd be quite familiar with these concepts. This is out of Reconciliation Queensland's documentation. So this is the framework, and these are the pillars in terms of race relations, equality and equity, historical acceptance, institutional integrity and unity. And you can look that up. I'm not going to go through all of those. I'm going to talk about collective reconciliation first. So when we think about even these bunya trees, you know, you see one here and there, but often, you know, we see them in clumps or forests. If you go up to the bunya mountains, they're all together, they're magnificent. Sometimes there's groups of them. Some of my family's been planting them around the place, and actually my mum and dad grow some of these up now from little saplings and then give them out to people, and they've been growing them. So, you know, putting them back into that Ipswich area and further afield, and that's really special too. So that's part of a human action. But what do we do in terms of the human collective? We have an individual actions and we have collective as well. When we talk about collectives, I talk about organisations. You know, we see that, and the University of Queensland, I'm going to talk about that as an example. I put that in there because it's an institution, but it's also, you've got collectives of people. You could have a collectives in terms of your Queensland reconciliation group. You might have collectives at work. Whatever that collective is. You might have collective in terms of some big families too, are collectives. Businesses, small and large, institutions, church groups. Some churches are very active in this space and some aren't. Okay. Government departments, they have reconciliation action plans, right? Regardless of whether we think, they're just, and there are people, and I'm going to make some statements here too today. We'll have some people that go, they're useless. Reconciliation statements, they're pretty kind of useless. But you know what? For organisations like government departments and certainly big businesses, BHP type or Rio, all those big businesses, resource companies, universities, they need structure, okay? You cannot make things happen just because you've got a little work unit over here or a little group over here that thinks reconciliation could be a good idea. We kind of have to have those reconciliation action plans. That's my thinking, might be other people, but we have to have some plan.
So I come from industry, so I come from big organisations that have RAPs. Previously with Transport Services or Port Spectrum that has an elevated RAP. And you're right, because before, so they've had a RAP for about 12 years, 10 years, right at the start. They were one of the few companies that started off. Without that structure, and they have an Indigenous Advisory Board as well, that holds the company to account, to a high standard. So without those, you don't get the CEO and you don't get all the executives. And then if they see the CEO talking about reconciliation, giving acknowledgements to country, then all of a sudden the whole organisation embraces it.
That's right.
So it's about leadership.
That's right. And it's kind of telling them what to do. Because they have KPIs about other things, they have plans and action plans about other things, they have operational plans. So it's ways to bring about change using the structures back. All right? When they don't work is when they're not following their plan, it's not embedded in their operational plans or not embedded in the KPIs, and you can probably bet that they're not doing other things as well. If they're not doing those things in their KPIs and their operational plan, there's probably other things not happening either, okay? Wouldn't be just the RAP stuff. So it's about the whole organisation. Then there's other things that could be young people, there's older groups. I worked with one group not long ago that was a University of Third Age group, and they were doing their own thing around older people, what they wanted to do as a group, and all kinds of people who are pushing for reconciliation as a member of a collective or a group. So it's a group thing, okay? I will go on in here talk about this engagement part, because even as a collective, this is how I see those four aspects I've got there. So you've got people that are fully engaged. You've got people that go, I want to go to this. Like, they come to events, they read things, they read information, they Google, they watch NITV, SBS, they participate in NAIDOC, they do all this sort of stuff. They're out there doing things. They look at what they can do in their workplace. They might question their family members if they're at a dinner table or a gathering and hear racism. They'll do all those kind of things, okay? And they're fully engaged in the process. They really want to make change, really want to see some reconciliation action happen. You've got people who are partially engaged. So people who are, and you can have collectives who are like, got to have a whole collective that's wanting to make change happen and move along. You've got others that are partially engaged where, they'll do a bit here, not here. They'll do a bit and be engaged, but if it means they got to cross a certain line, they might not be, so other people are really busy, so they can only engage with how they can engage. The rest of the time they might be doing other things, or they may have care responsibilities, or they have a job. So they're partially engaged. Could be people that want to be engaged more but can't, but there's also people who won't challenge themselves to push further, or if they're compromised, they won't move to that next level of fully engaged. Got other people who are interested in being engaged but not. So they're kind of like, yeah, well, it interests me, but, I'm not kind of going to, they don't move to that next level of even being partially engaged. They know they should do something, but they don't. They won't sort of put themselves out. So they're sort of those people that are interested, but you kind of need to, I see that we kind of need to hook some of those people to kind of move them into the partially engaged even first, because there's a whole lot of people in that group that are interested but really not sure necessarily how they can engage more. And so in the whole reconciliation work, it's about how do you move those people along, how can you gauge their interest or develop their interest a bit more to even be partially engaged, even in a way that they could be engaged, okay? You got those people who are really not interested. And you know what? For some of those people who are not interested in being engaged, they're not interested, they're probably not going to be interested, and you know, really, do I want to waste my time on them? And I've got to ask some of you, do you want to waste your time on them? Or is your time best to be in the ones that are interested and want to be more engaged, and the partially interested to be more fully engaged, to do something? Because you could spend a lot of time on the ones that are not even interested, and then you've got to look at where that time goes, okay? So they're people, you know, you can tell people that something's on, they never come. Whatever, one time, but they're not interested. So I think, no, they may get pulled along in the current of things later on, and they might change to being interested, but right now they're not. So you've kind of got to work that out in any kind of activism or any kind of action around reconciliation. I think that's with anything, but for me, as it applies to reconciliation or even some of the other issues around social justice and equity, you know, people kind of you can kind of work out where people are on those things. And you probably know people like that, okay? You probably know people that sit in any of those things. And you can apply it to other things. You can apply it to, you know, organising birthday functions, whatever you want. But I'm going to talk about a collective action. I'm going to use UQ as an example because I work there now. And just talk about our RAP, because it is around that framework, and you'll see, you know, and it builds on what Robert said around having a way forward of that people know what to do. You got to think this organisation is, you know, hitting 7,500, 8,000 staff, got 55,000 students. You can't rely on people's just goodwill, they might do something. You kind of have to have actions that get built into things. So we've had some strong things lately. We had our launch, which was in December. It was a big day. We had it across the St Lucia campus, the Hurston campus and Gatton, and we had a whole day of events. From the launch of the RAP, it was one of the biggest events that campus has seen, and we kind of laughed and said it was a blackout because we had a lot of community people come to that day. It was a lot of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on campus. We had a Kev Carmody event in the afternoon, and that was really interesting because Kev was a student at UQ at one point, so it was good listening to what he said from the student perspective. You know, and we had Arnie Lilla Watson, who had worked, and she was actually the first academic staff member of UQ. So sometimes RAPs, what they also can do, or reconciliation can do, is help you revisit that memory or revisit that history and make some of that hidden history revealed and embedded in the history of the organisation. So you think about that around even where some of you have come from today. What are those stories in your local suburbs or your area around Aboriginal people that have remained hidden, okay, that need to come out? If you work, what are those things in your workplace that remain hidden, you know, that need to come out in terms of your organisational history? We have an Innovate RAP, so we recognise that we're not at the base. UQ's done some work, and I do acknowledge the work that was done before I arrived at UQ in preparation to start getting that RAP done, and some of that was led by Cindy Shannon, and then other people had done that. Shane Drum had built on that, and then I came in to further build on that and to bring it home to launch it. But the actions and the deliverables, really about aspiring and to trying to get up to that next level, trying to establish some best practice, certainly within the university, of what we can do, and try to focus and strengthen the relationships we have with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but to make new ones. We do acknowledge as the oldest uni in Queensland, you know, in the main university. There's been people that have got a long history with University of Queensland. Some of that has not been good. So one of the key things that I'm working on in terms of some of that relationship is some of the repatriation. The university has lots of things in its archival collections. Could be human ancestral remains, body tissue samples, teeth, all kinds of things, okay? Artworks, a whole lot of things that has acquired over time. Some things with the permissions, and that's where they will be housed. Other things we're navigating with the museum, and other things we're navigating then also with the museum of returning those ancestors to country, where those countries of those people are known, okay? Because there's also issues around that, as you used to know, Heather, around some of, you know, it could be not that people were stolen generations, but they're stolen humans from places and not documented. And then engaging staff and students and stakeholders in our activities and developing strategies around you know, what we do in the university. That's our vision. I've got copies of this stuff here, so you don't have to read everything and think, you know, you've got to cover everything while I'm putting it up there. This was something really fun to do. We actually were out on the lawn, and it was during Reconciliation Week. And so we made this human signs, you know, and students love all that sort of stuff. Young people love it. But, you know, UQ, the grounds are so beautiful. I don't know if people have been there, but the gardens are so beautiful that people take wedding photos there. Yeah, they were taking their wedding photos, and Nell, who works with me, Nell Angus, I said, hey Nell, there's people. She went over and grabbed them, and they come into it. So that's them. That's the wedding party. And they loved it. It added something for their wedding. So, you know, but they will remember that, okay? They will remember that. For us, some of what we're committed to is we now have an Oversight Committee which has people from the uni, people from community, students and alumni on that committee. So we have, you know, elders on that committee. It's got to be mutual benefit. It's not just all about the uni. It's got to be mutual benefit for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people and communities. We are trying to embed knowledge and systems into the way we operate at the uni. We want greater respect, and that means also having greater acknowledgement and embedding of protocols. And that's something that's been a little bit lacking, you know, that we've upped our game on. And it's not just for the sake of it. It's got to be done correctly and properly. Other thing is around this physical and built environment. And if you hear me talk at the uni, I say to them, you know, more artwork. I don't know if you've been to some of these universities, but there is a lot of artwork, right? A lot of artwork. So we can't just keep acquiring more art. We do have our rap artwork, but if people want to gift art, that's fine. But I would rather people gift monies for scholarships. I would rather the university use that money to invest in scholarships for Aboriginal and Torres Strait people to get university degrees, invest in projects, invest in our young people to get people into uni. I mean, that's what we do. We do university studies, we do research, but I want to see more of our young people graduating with degrees, you know. We don't have a lot of scholarships. It's a bit deceptive sometimes thinking there are scholarships, but we need a lot more for the students we have. And opportunities for employment, teaching and research and engagement. And then this whole thing around here, this governance. You know, who manages all this? Who tracks it? So one of the best things about having our RAP with Reconciliation Australia is it has an external monitoring mechanism. Some universities haven't gone down that path. Some businesses haven't gone down that path. And organisations haven't gone down that path, which means they don't have to publish on their website and don't have to make public what their outcomes or their measurements for their RAP are. We've gone down that process, so we want to be held publicly accountable for what we do. And I think that goes back to what you said, Robert, you know, about the checking and making sure those actions happen and those KPIs happen. Our priorities is around student representation, employment, teaching and research. We did have that artwork, A Guidance Through Time, that was done by Casey Coolwell and Cora Mankeltau, okay, Quandamooka women. They won the contract, so it was We insisted, my office, that tender go out publicly and that all artists have the opportunity to apply for that. So that's something else that I really insist on now through my office and my members of my team, that things are advertised, that tenders are put out in that way, that people have the opportunity. You know, we know it's not just universities, but a whole range of areas where often it's a friend of a friend of a friend, or we know this one or that one. That disadvantages Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Okay? It disadvantages, and it means you don't necessarily get the best result you could have. Could get a great person, but you may not. Mightn't get the best one you need. All right? So we do try and do that as much as possible now, and that has resulted in a whole lot of other actions that people see us trying to do things better, not jobs for friends. These are the student numbers. I don't mind putting that up for you because they are public. So we currently have 433 enrolled.
Out of a population of how many?
55,000. Keep in mind nearly 46% are internationals, so domestic students. Retention rate and success rate and awards, that has increased. So if I go back to 5 years ago, we only had about 20 to 30 students getting any kinds of awards. So we pushed that up, that our students, we have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students with OPs of 1s. Why aren't they coming through to get awards for the awards they should be getting? So last year we had a Torres Strait Islander man, Carl, and he works in Logan now. He graduated with physiotherapy. He was the valedictorian for the whole school of physiotherapy, okay? Which means he was the best student overall. So we have students right up there who should be getting also nominated for awards. So I want you to think about, in terms of an individual action, when do you know Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are just out there doing great stuff that should be nominated for awards as well? Okay, whether they're Australia Day Awards, whether they're Great Queensland Great Awards, whether they're Order of Australia Award, whether they're Business Awards, Community Awards, all these kind of awards. When are the other, you know, people should not be just nominated for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander awards. People are out there doing fantastic stuff. Okay, I'll also see this 83%. We are 7th in the country, but there's still room for improvement. So it means there's some universities who aren't way down, but if we're 7th in the country out of 40 odd universities, there's some unis doing quite poorly in terms of success rates in moving people through to graduation. You know, that needs to be a collective action around reconciliation. Teaching and learning. I've got a photo of Tracy Bunder. She's just joined the university, and also has Ree Saunders, has just joined in the last 5 or 6 weeks. Tracy's come from another university to work with us at UQ. She is known in the Brisbane community. She's a full professor. She's been a professor for 15, nearly 20 years. So it's fabulous to have her on board. But this is some of the work that she's doing, looking at indigenising curriculum and putting content into curriculum. For your work in terms of what you do, I want you to think about how you embed Indigenous anything into what you're doing, okay? The research work, I've got these seeds up there again, or the nuts up there again with the great tree, because what I try to say to people, don't just do a research project. What does the research project lead to? If you've got research happening in your work area or your area community group, what does it go and lead to? Where does it move to? Okay? You can't just do the project and then finish it and do nothing. And for us, it's about how do we move to be the sector leader, okay? And there, I'm not going to go through that, but that is just all the things that we have to do around making sure this happens. So for us, if things don't go off, you know, if they actually don't happen, but they go off the rails, it's going to be mostly through some of this process. Right? In terms of the personal, I put these ones up here again because it's all the same things. You know, it's all of you as individuals. People can be members and service users of organisations. So if you belong to a CWA, you're a member, but you belong to a collective. If you're a group of a sewing group, you're an individual, but belong to a group. If you're with Reconciliation Queensland, you're a member, but you belong to the group. People could be a member of their local parish, you're a member and an individual, but you're part of a group. But as you as an individual, what are you doing? What do you do? You as that individual nut, what do you do? Okay? How can you influence the others that might have been in the bigger nut? How do you do that? How can you do that? Also in the personal, this is something I want you to think about when you go home. You take your nut home, you can take that home, is think about where your point of engagement is. You know, what can you do? Are you wanting to be more fully engaged, or can you only be partially engaged? For me, people here are already engaged. You've turned up today. You know, you've come today. You are interested, you're engaged. It's about what level of engagement do you want to have in what is happening. Okay? So how can you get, you know, and there are things that you probably could talk with Reconciliation Queensland about how you get more engaged. If you live in an area, what are kind of activities happening? When I come back down here, move back down here to Brisbane, I can go to something. I don't know how Auntie Heather or you manage this, Robert, but Auntie Heather, you must get so many invitations, you know, like there is something on every single week, and some weeks there's 3 or 4 things a week that you can go to that is about being engaged with Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, from the arts to sport to politics to everything. So it's really then looking at what kind of engagement you want to have, how you want that, and what kind of levels you need to have in terms of the doing. Okay? What is that, and how much can you do? The ones that are interested in being engaged, it's around how do you get more interested. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, or how can you pull other people along so that you're not the only one, because sometimes it gets a bit lonely, right, being that one, or it gets lonely sometimes, or you've got to have people that, you know, when you raise things, and I know certainly I've sat at many a dinner table and many a lunchroom table, and I'll hear something and you can't let it go, or a boardroom table and you say something and you can just see those other eyes roll, you know, and you know, they're thinking, here she goes again, you know. Sometimes you do need to have other people at that table. You need to have other people in that tea room, in that family, in that group that are going to support you, that you're not the only one all the time. And I will say at this point, the Aboriginal one in the room shouldn't have to be the only one all the time. We as Aboriginal people should not be the only one all the time that has to raise everything. And then you often hear non-Indigenous people say, oh, I knew I should have probably said something, but, you know, that doesn't help us. Okay? It does not help us. People need to say things, they need to do things. They're the people that, you know, they're kind of some of them are sitting the partially engaged people, you know, the ones I said before, they're a bit interested but they don't turn up sometimes because it pushes them over the line, or they know they should do something but they don't. Okay? They're partially engaged, they need to be move along a bit further. So you need to work out for you where you sit in that too, and how far you can or want to move, and if you want to go that bit further, how do you do that? You know, even if it is about confronting some of the things you say yourself. Because I have this discussion a lot at work. People ask me something. I just come to have a meeting, you know, and we're going to have a meeting to ask you about this or whatever. And they've got questions, and so I fire the questions away and ask me the questions. And you know what? Then they get real defensive. Right? They get really upset sometimes. And I said, well, you asked me the questions. They asked me the questions, you know. And I think in my head, they asked me the question. I'm trying to be really pleasant and nice. But there's sometimes no other way to respond other than a direct, honest answer. So you kind of think, well, they wanted a question answered, but they still asked the question, even though now they're not happy with what they got, you know. So you've got to work that out sometimes. When you have those discussions, sometimes it's the personal. And you want honest conversations. You're going to get honest answers, okay? But the relationships that can come from that can be really strong and really good. And if people are really honest with themselves, sometimes they've never really sat down and had really honest, strong, open conversations with Aboriginal and Torres Strait people. So people think they know Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, but essentially they don't. They know Aboriginal and Torres Strait people through filtered lenses, through what they've read in TV, through what they've seen in the newspaper, heard on the radio, but don't really know, never really sat down and had a conversation to have the conversation. Okay? And people need to be more, even some of us as Aboriginal people, we've got to have those conversations with each other too. You know? We do. So, is that making sense to people? Yeah? So what can you do? Be more informed, be more engaged. And how people do that is got to read. You know, if you can't read, get audio stuff. Listen to the, you know, if you have trouble concentrating and reading, listen to the radio, listen to informed radio. Not those, some of those crazy radio people. Informed radio. Listen to interviews on radio. There's heaps, you know, that you can listen to the radio. Whether it's on, you know, Murray stations or through, you know, ABC. You've got Speaking Out. You know, there's lots of shows on radio that you can listen to. Find out when they're on and listen to them. Many of them you can play back later. You know, some of them will make you laugh. Some of them you're going to have to cross your legs because you know what's going to happen because you're laughing so much. But, you know, because they really will make you laugh. Others are going to make you go, oh my God, you know, like your heart's feeling ripped out of you. You know, but that's the honesty that's coming through in the radio too, of people's voices. Read articles, whether they're, you know, in The Guardian, whatever, all kinds of different articles to look at opinion. And attend information and sharing events where people are honest in their sharing and information sharing. You know, think about that. Think about what's available and go. I've got Speak Up and Don't Accept Racism. There are too many people just letting some things go. Okay? Whether it's in your local area, your families, sporting clubs, sideline of a footy or a soccer carnival, whatever, you think about it. There's lots of things that there's opportunities to say things or ways things are heard, and you will see them in the... When you start looking at the content and you start reading the articles and start listening, you will hear people talking about what happens sometimes. You'll hear the way people are treated in shops. You'll hear the way things happen. You know, if you see that see some Aboriginal or Torres Strait person, even other culturally diverse person, the way people are treated, people need to speak up. Turn up and attend events. Marcia Langton wrote a really great article. It was a very short article not long ago in it's a online blog called Saturday Papers, I think it's called, the Saturday Times or Saturday Papers. It said good leaders or people with leadership turn up. It's one thing they do is turn up, you know. Going gets tough. People need to know they got people to can rely on and that people will turn up. That people are going to be there, okay? People are going to be there. If you can't be there, don't be there for a good reason. Just don't come all the time. And for me, some of the stuff that I get into, that stuff about turning up, is I will turn up and I want other people to turn up with me to things, you know. Sometimes stuff is hard. There's a lot of things I do at the uni. I'm the only person there, only Aboriginal person there, but I do like other people to come with me, even if it's to walk with me to the room, and I got to go in the room, you know. You know, UQ just recently had the Ramsay Centre. That was one of them. I had to go and talk to it in a room. I was the only one. Next time I took Tracy Bunda with me. So it's those things. There could be protests and rallies going outside, but I've still got to be in the room, you know. And when are you in the room? What are you going to say when you're in the room? Don't just do the easy stuff. You know, do the hard stuff too. There's too people that want to be there for the easy and the fun stuff, but not there when the going gets tough and the hard stuff. And I acknowledge always that it's hard work and that sometimes it is really, really, really hard work, okay? But as I said earlier, if we think these young people and other people coming through, we want them to be the great leaders they need to be after we're gone, it's going to take work. If we want Australia to be a better place, if you want Queensland to be a better place, Australia to be a better place, we got to do the work. I don't want the grandchildren that are there now and their grandchildren to have to be doing what we do now. Okay? That means we have to be the ancestors they need for the future. And that means hard work. Okay? Hard work. So what can we do? These are some of the things that we're all going to have to start getting our heads around and start facing and start getting a bit more informed about going forward. Whether or not you're on board with them yet or not, or you've got a certain way of thinking about the world or not with these yet, but these are things coming forward for Queensland in particular. We're going to have to with the Tracks to Treaty. Okay? It was announced not long ago. That's the process this state government's moving towards. Okay? Victoria is and the Territory is as well, but Queensland's already announced it. Reconciliation in Australia, what are we doing in terms of reconciliation? Where's that agenda going? What is going to keep happening with it? Uluru Statement from the Heart. You know, what is going to happen with that? How can you know more about it and lend a voice to it if that's what you want to do? You might want to give some time to that. You might think, well, I'm not quite sure about it. So if you're not sure about it, read about it. It's all online. You can download the documents. It's all available. Okay? Same with the information on Voice Treaty Truth. It is part of, connected to Uluru Statement, but it's changed a little bit. Okay? It's slightly morphed. There's more a campaign at the moment about having a voice. Okay? Because the Uluru Statement didn't get much traction. The work is now going into having a voice. Okay? So read what that means and what that entails. I am really trying to navigate early in the year to get Megan Davis and a few other people to come to Brisbane. She is an alumnus of UQ. She's a graduate, but I'd like to get her and some other people involved in some of this work to have a forum, more than like an hour or 2 hours, but a kind of a symposium type thing in Brisbane for us, to start being a bit more informed about what we can do. And then Tracks to Treaty, what will that mean? At this stage it's kind of been announced, but there hasn't been anything further about it. But once it starts coming out, we're all going to have to start getting our heads around what that means. Okay? It's not just about Aboriginal Torres Strait people. It's not just us having a treaty, because who are we going to have a treaty with? Okay? It's about what does that look like? I've already had a discussion with the university, with the leadership around, you know, in New Zealand they have the Treaty of Waitangi. It's a national treaty. Universities there are tied to indicators based on the treaty in education. So one university I'm very aware of in the North Island is working to be the first treaty compliant university. So does that mean, you know, is that something we've got to look at in terms of where I work currently, of being treaty compliant, if that's where we go in 5 to 10 years? I don't know. Or is it something else? Is Close the Gap going to be, I haven't put those things up there, but is Close the Gap going to be linked with Tracks to Treaty? We don't know. So I will open it up to questions a bit more. You can find me on social media or email me at the university, and I'm happy to have contact with people. I'll take a few questions and then we might there's still food left, and have a cup of tea and we can talk over a cup of tea and some food.
So first of all, Bronwyn, thank you very much for your presentation. So my question goes back to a comment you made about the Uluru Statement. So, and it's more a statement from me that I think that the significance of that has been that it has taken the moral high ground. And there is now something that can be referred back to for, at least for the politicians to go, here's a statement that has come from our First Nation people. And here's something that we can work towards. And it is a foundation document, as far as I'm concerned. So while it didn't get a lot of traction when it first, I think if we watch back in the future years, look back to that statement, it's going to be, that was a turning point.
I agree. I think the other thing that I hold to is that process was funded by the government. So they were asking, in essence, what do Aboriginal Torres Strait people want? And so it's problematic that they funded the regional dialogues, they funded a national meeting. Okay, so there was 12 regional dialogues. Then they funded a national gathering, which was held in Alice Springs. And there were processes where I understand that, the 50% of the people were traditional owners through the rep bodies who went to that, and there were other people who were reps to go to that national meeting to develop the statement, which was a gift to the Australian people. It wasn't a gift to the parliamentarians. So it was a gift to the Australian public, to the people, to then say, well, we're not going to do that. So you ask people what they want. And there's a history of that happening in Australia where Aboriginal and Torres Strait people do the consultation and the navigating and the questioning and what would you want to have happen, but then don't do it. And it's the same as what I raised earlier about, ask the question, but when the answer's there, you don't like the answer. So it's a kind of pick and choose too, a little bit. But I do see it as a watershed statement and a watershed document. And from my perspective, I'm going to keep working to try and get it traction and get it legs. But I will give some time at the moment to the voice, which is part of it. Yeah.
So the second point I want to make is around treating. It's more an interesting fact that we picked up during the last NAIDOC and National Reconciliation Week. And it was all about the fact that Australia is the only former British colony that doesn't have a treaty with its First Peoples. And that's something that we should not be very proud of.
I was very surprised to learn this, and some of you may know this, others will not. I do have another role that I have as a commissioner with the Queensland Productivity Commission. Okay, so I was the commissioner that was the presiding commissioner for the discrete and remote Indigenous inquiry that was held recently. But in that process of that inquiry, and we just worked on the imprisonment inquiry, and we're working on the recycling at the moment, little poppers and stuff. So we're doing that review of that at the moment. But in terms of the remote inquiry, when I was up in North Queensland in the Torres Strait, there was mention of a treaty. Okay, and I went, treaty? And I was thinking it was this treaty that, are they framing it not Traxter Treaty because it hadn't been announced, but treaty in a sense, is that what they're looking at for themselves with Queensland, or Torres Strait Authority in terms of it itself as an authority? No, there does exist a treaty. The treaty is with certain islands from the Torres Strait with islands that are with part of New Guinea, and they enable the free flow of boats and people that move between a set of islands. I think it's, don't quote me on this, you'll have to look it up, 7 or 8 islands between New Guinea and Australia in terms of the relationality between those peoples. And this treaty goes back to the 1889-87 period, and so it predates the Federation, and that treaty is still enacted. So we still have that today, and there is still a framework therefore for a treaty that exists in the Australian system and could be built on. So there's a treaty, but not in this context, Robert. Yeah.
I was reading recently where I think, I don't know if it's all or not, I think it may have been South Australia the state was going to enact its own treaty because they were sick of waiting for the Commonwealth Government to do it.
Yep.
So, and I wouldn't be surprised if Victoria followed that road as well.
Yep. Victoria does have already a process in place. So Jill Gallagher, who's a fantastic woman, used to be the CEO of the Victorian Aboriginal Community Control Health Organisation known as VACCHO. She's the commissioner for that, and she's leading that process currently in Victoria. So we may see them move quite quickly. I don't know. I mean, it's a very interesting space for us. So I just say to people, keep reading, looking at information as it comes up, think about how that may relate to us, think about, what that may mean for Queensland, what that may mean for you as individuals in terms of space and talking to other people. Yeah.
I think that it may well be that the states push the federal government, because that's what happened with the sorry, the apology. It was the states that were doing that, and then that finally gave the impetus for the Commonwealth to get up and do it.
I think you could be right. If they all sort of do it one at a time, then there may be no option. Peter?
I need to have a correction. I mentioned our AGM on the 12th of September, of course that's today.
2 days for that, actually.
It's the 12th of next month, and it's being held at the Grange Library, so if you want to come along to that, you're welcome to. Back to what's actually happening in Victoria. Victoria is progressing and has been progressing for quite some time, but they have only 6 First Nations groups in Victoria. In Queensland, we are way above the rest of the country in numbers of First Nation groups, and we also have the Torres Strait Islands, those who live in those islands too. And of course, the treaty they referred to as an appropriate treaty being that some of those islands you can go to Boyga and Saibai and you can stand on the northern shore and you can actually clearly see the villages in New Guinea.
That's
and
correct.
so you know that there is a whole lot of complexities around there for Queensland, and so it's great to see that that's moving forward, but it probably won't jump as quickly as what Victoria and South Australia will do. But we all could jump very quickly if the federal government make a decision about going down that road, and at the moment they're balking at it, even with their minister in place now. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre.
Hi, I'm just a student, a social work student for QUT or whatever it is, no, CQU, sorry, uni. So I suppose my question is, do you think, you know, with the voice type of thing, do you think the Australian public overall are acknowledging enough of what's going on? Are they aware of what the situation is in regards to how their government is not accepting the statement, you know, the Uluru statement or whatever? Like, I suppose where I'm coming from is that, do you think a referendum would help push that over the line, or do you think it's maybe too soon for that sort of thing to happen?
It may be too soon. I think we need to have more people ready, because we do need to have, you know, a high percentage to get a referendum through. That doesn't mean it can't be tried at some point. I do think there are pockets of people, collectives of people that do know what it's about. There are people that are engaged who have been reading and understand and know and are very much part of action. If you look on social media you can see that, but there's other people who aren't engaged, and then there's people that put stuff that tells you they're not ready, or they don't want to be engaged, or they're not supportive. So there's a mixture there. But certainly, I mean, we've also seen whole pages taken out in like the Australian of like 20-something law firms, big law firms, that committed to the Uluru Statement and said they endorse it. So they did as collectives in terms of businesses, but whether all their staff would individually, if we went to referendum, that's because it's not the businesses who vote, right? It's the individuals. We hold as citizens, it's our votes. So it's about how they then, take that emphasis to carry it through in their organisations. We see other companies, we see some universities have come out with statements. I know one of the Western Australian ones came out recently and said, you know, they as a university support. Well, are there thousands of students going to do that? You know, if your Vice-Chancellor or Chancellor comes out from the university where you're enrolled, comes out and says we support it, are all the thousands of students who are enrolled going to do that, and the staff that work there going to support that? So they're the issues we have to have yet. And it's about engaging people more. And there's some people that really don't care. And they're probably the numbers of people who, it doesn't really matter, they're going to be the no vote or just not sure and do the donkey vote.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Auntie Heather.
How dare they do the microphone? Thank you, Bronwyn, and it's lovely listening to you. But the afternoon is winding on.
Thank you.
Rosalie has a small gift for you. Thank you for coming today. And people have some more food, enjoy the rest of the time here. And Bronwyn will be here for a little while, so you can ask her some more questions on a more personal level. So thank you very much, Bronwyn.
Thank you, Auntie Heather. Thank you.